making those personal connections outside the meeting, talking about the grandkids or the cats or the day job. It's that concept of helping to build that personal bank account. And I'm putting deposits into that bank account that later on I might need to make a withdrawal. And if I've made enough of those deposits and those positive moments with that person, then hopefully they'll be okay with me making that withdrawal and asking something of them.
On this episode of Slow Smoke Business, we're talking to the Honorable Casey Jones. Now, Casey has had a long career in business, but he's also moved into the public space in politics. And we want to talk to Casey about what are the ingredients, what are the things, the traits that you need to have in order to both succeed in business and publicly and move your idea forward.
We're really excited about today's guest. This is somebody that I go back pretty far with, having grown up in Pensacola. But more importantly than that, he currently serves on the city council there, representing District 3. He's also had a very long and prestigious career in leadership and leadership consultation. Welcome to the show, the Honorable Mr. Casey Jones.
Thanks so much.
First time we've ever introduced somebody with the word honorable in front of them. They'll never put that in front of Frank or I, so...
It's never going to feel right to me.
So, Casey, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I would love it if we could start by, if you could give us kind of like a little brief history of how in the world does somebody, in the business world and relatively young and not super deep into your career yet, how do you end up on the city council?
It's funny. I grew up in Pensacola, like we said, and just really love the city, love being here. I moved away for a few years whenever the area was really kind of in a downturn. I'd say the economy was down in 2010, 2011. I actually quit my job and went and hiked the Appalachian Trail for about 5 months.
Wow. Okay. The whole thing?
2/3 of it.
Wow.
But yeah, it was just something where I was like, I got to do something different. I was about to turn 30 at the time and just wanted to get out and go. When I came back, I actually took a job about 70 miles away over in Destin. And while I was gone, this whole revitalization of Pensacola started happening, and it was exciting to me. Fortunately, I met my wife, which brought me back to Pensacola, and just really getting interested in the politics of the city, really less the politics, more the development and just the growth and liking, I liked seeing Pensacola turn into the type of city that I wanted it to be. I wanted to be involved in that. So I actually heard that the person that was in the seat that I'm in now wasn't running again. And that just kind of sparked my interest. I hadn't even really thought about it before that. But I decided to run and fortunately ran unopposed. So it was
Oh, wow.
smooth sailing right into the seat. But I would say the lack of opposition stopped as soon as I got into office.
I want to dive into some of your business stuff yet, but that's like the super interesting part of talking to somebody like you. So when you put yourself out there and you say, I'm going to run for office, the first thing you have to, I guess, get super comfortable with is just the level of criticism that you're going to face in a role like that. And people are going to sit back and just fire arrows at you, and they've got absolutely nothing invested in criticizing you, because if they're wrong, nothing happens to them. If they're right, then a lot of bad things can happen for who they're criticizing. So tell me about the process of, when did that start, I guess? When did you start seeing criticism as you moved into that role?
I'd say it was like the very first full city council meeting that we had. There was a big contentious issue with Community Maritime Park, which I'm sure both of you are familiar with. It's a park that used to be a site that was contaminated, and they cleaned it up years ago. The city voted on what they wanted to see there. And other than the baseball field that's there now, it mostly sat empty and still sits empty, and hasn't gotten the development that they planned on having there. Well, the first meeting was, all right, let's start voting on this new development that wants to come in there, and let's see if we can approve a lease for these people. And there's 4 new people on the city council. None of us had any kind of preparation for this, and we're all just kind of like, "Oh, wow, this is a big issue." and you're no matter what decision you make, I've realized that you're going to make somebody unhappy. So it's trying to represent the people of my district, and do what they want me to do, but there's no way to represent all of them and the decision that they want me to make. So it's also using the knowledge that I've gained. And man, the past year and a half since I've been on council, that's been all I've tried to do is gain knowledge so that I can make the right decisions for the city.
So where does the hate come from exactly? Is it Twitter? Is it in the media, or is it where are you seeing a lot of like the criticism?
So I learned about 2 months ago that I should not rely on the feedback that comes from social media. Specifically, Facebook is what happened in this situation. There's a road, Summit Boulevard, which I'm sure you guys are also familiar with. It's a pretty short road. It's 4 lanes on one section. Doesn't have much traffic, and some people want to reduce it down to 2 lanes. So we decided we're going to vote to do a study to see what would happen if we did that. That's like the first thing that really got people in my district engaged. And I decided to speak up about it on social media and immediately got blasted. And that was really the first big criticism that I got. Of course, with all these other decisions, people are going to speak out, but it was much more general. Then this time it was, aren't you supposed to be representing the people in your district? Why are you getting so defensive? Why are you defending this idea? And it was more, I realized that on social media, especially, explaining why you support something sometimes comes off as being defensive and trying to push your agenda on someone, when really I was just trying to explain why I thought it was a good idea.
If people have it in to try to criticize you or whatnot, it's you don't get a lot of points. People don't get a lot of points for changing their mind, right? And so they're gonna take shots and that. Now, so before you were in politics, you worked for you had a nice career in leadership and sort of business consulting, and you were working with Studer Group for a while. Is that right?
Yeah, I worked with Studer Group for about 6 years, up until right at the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021. The organization kind of went away. It was absorbed into the company that purchased them, Huron, and left shortly after that.
So Studer Group, for people that don't know, is just an amazing organization. If you're from Pensacola, like, you're super aware of Studer Group and the great things that their leader has done and the company has done. Sort of just an awesome organization. Talk a little bit about what it's like to work in an organization like that people from the outside recognize in such a positive way.
It's tough at times. It was really, I learned a ton while I was there, and that was something that I've learned over time is to try to be that lifelong learner, where that's the only way you're going to grow and continue to improve your career, especially. But working there was tough because everybody was such a high performer. They have this really intense hiring process. It took me about 7 months to get on. I think I had 5 different interviews. But I really wanted to work there because I knew a lot about them. I'd read some of the books that Quint Studer had written, and just stuck with it until I got on. I remember having a conversation with someone else that had been there for a while, and I saw him as like, at this really high level, and he was, and we were having a conversation about how it's sometimes difficult in that type of environment, and he agreed that everybody around you is such a high performer, it's hard to stand out. Where at previous jobs, you could be the shining star pretty easily if you just do the work you need to do and push a little harder. It was more difficult to do that in that situation.
So you've been in other organizations that didn't have like an all-star cast like that. How do those two organizations compare in terms of what they're able to do?
I think having that all-star cast really is what pushed that organization along and helped them to, eventually sell for, I think it was $250 million or something. It was an organization that was known for having a lot of high performing employees, And we had to have that because that was what we helped other organizations do. And because of that, we had a really good reputation amongst those companies, and it was primarily healthcare organizations that we worked with. And I think because of that, also we were able to charge a premium for the work that we did. I remember someone saying when I first started that we were kind of the Louis Vuitton of consultancies. So that was something that I really enjoyed doing.
Is that a good thing? I think that's a good thing, right? I think they meant it.
I
Probably
think so,
meant it
yeah.
in a good way.
It's something that could hurt you in an economic downturn sometimes. When COVID came along, there was a big switch in the type of the way we had to sell what we were doing. People were a little hesitant to spend quite as much money, especially these healthcare organizations that we worked with, when all their surgical services shut down overnight. All their clinics would close for months, and these are the places that we're going to every day doing work. So it was something that having that premium product could sometimes maybe hurt the organization as well. But I think for the most part, it's what helped the organization grow and do as well as it did.
So, Casey, we've talked a little bit about your business consulting background and a little bit about your city council. Talk to us a little bit about the overlap. Like, what are some things that you learned in the business side that have translated really well into your experience in city council?
I'll say before working at Studer Group, I was actually in hospitality for a little over a decade, mostly in hotel resort management. And that went really well into what we did at Studer Group, which was improving patient experience through employee engagement. So it was a lot of the people skills that are sometimes thought of as soft skills. I think that both of those things have really helped me get into the public sector and dealing with that criticism that you talked about earlier. I said that I got out of hospitality because I was tired of getting yelled at. You get to a certain level, and the only time you get to talk to people is when they're upset about something. But over time, I realized that was really something that I enjoyed doing because I had these problems that I got to solve, and that's something that keeps things interesting, is trying to solve a problem. So determining what the issue is, why this person's upset, and how I can fix that. And that's something that really I've focused on since being on city council, is what are the problems that we're seeing in the city, and how can I help change those? So, oftentimes I'm criticized because I might bring an ordinance to city council that really doesn't affect my district as much as you think it would. Maybe it's something in the downtown area that I'm addressing. A couple things like booting cars and private parking lots. People are pretty upset when they come out and there's a boot on their car and they've got to pay $200 to get it off. So regulating that industry, I worked on helping to allow food trucks be on public streets, where there was an old ordinance that kept that from happening. That was, I think, 30 years old, and nobody had addressed it. So things like that I start to see that people are, maybe a little dramatic to say suffering, but people are having issues with the ordinance that we have on the books, and they're affecting them in a way that's negative. That's where I say, okay, how can I help solve this problem, and start to dig into that. So that's really been my approach on city council.
When it comes to like de-escalating situations, I'm sure there's some specific skills that you learned in hospitality and then in your leadership consulting. What are some of the specific things that you're able to do when you see a problem coming? What's your mental checklist to kind of get ready for that and help defuse something?
Yeah, so the first thing for me is to take a personal approach. I talked about the road. I'm going to use the term road diet. If y'all haven't heard that yet, it's where you're kind of shrinking a road. We talked about where those folks were really upset about that. And the ones that I was getting the most pushback whenever I was talking to them on Facebook, I was like, okay, I got to shut this down and I got to talk to this person. So there were 3 people actually that I talked to on the phone. And once we got on the phone and we're actually able to have a personal conversation, that immediately de-escalated things. So I think having that personal approach, I'm going to tell a quick story about whenever I was in hospitality, because this is one that stands out to me. I worked at a hotel resort that was on the beach. And if you're familiar with the beaches here in Northwest Florida, they're beautiful white sand, beautiful emerald color water. And I had a guest that came up to the front desk. She was upset. So they came back and got me. And while I'm talking to her, she was upset because the place where she was sitting on the pool deck, they were closing down and they were going to use it for a special event. And the first thing that came to my mind, well, we have these chairs out on the beach. This is where everybody wants to sit, but they're like $50 a day for 2 chairs. So I'm going to go ahead and get her set up there and take care of that. And she said, okay. She walked away. About 5 minutes later, she came back screaming at me, and I was just blown away. And she felt that I was taking advantage of her, not listening to her, treating her differently because she was a woman than I would if she was a man. And that, I mean, that affected me personally. I was like, I was just upset at myself that it came across that way. So I realized that getting on that personal level, I wouldn't sat down with her, but I didn't listen to her and say, why is it that you're upset? Is this something that you would actually like to do? She didn't want to sit on the beach. She didn't like getting sandy. Some people don't like sand. She wanted to sit in that chair by the pool. And just taking the time to understand why she was upset really helped to de-escalate that. And that's what I try to do in any kind of situation. It's hard to do that when there's 54,000-ish people in Pensacola, and a seventh of those are in my district. So it's difficult to do that with everybody, but on a one-by-one basis, I try to do that as much as I can.
What's the silliest thing you think somebody has said about you, either in your career or in your political career? Like, I'm sure people are yelling about roads and everything else, or in your career, there's different things. But what's the goofiest thing you've had somebody say where you're like...
Without putting a whole lot of thought into this, the first thing that pops into my head is the comment that I hear so often that says, follow the money, and look at these backroom deals that must be happening. And I'm like, I don't even know how that could happen.
Where is this backroom? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So I will go to coffee with somebody and they'll offer to pay for my $3 coffee. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. It could look bad. It's not ethical for a politician to get paid off in any way, even if it's a cup of coffee. So that is something that sometimes to me seems silly. I understand how it may look that way. But with the laws that are in place, I really don't understand how anybody could do that. And I know at least on the city council, the folks that I work with, we may disagree, but every one of them I know is a good person. And as soon as the meeting's over, I'm talking to one person about her cats that she rescued over the weekend, and I'm talking to somebody else about her grandkids and or how their day job is going. So it's I know that's something that doesn't happen, at least on city council, and I don't know how anybody else would get away with actually having something like that happen.
So you've done a lot in leadership. What do you think that is something that every leader should know? You've been around a lot of great leaders, Studer Group, other places. You've counseled people on leadership. What do you think is, if you're counseling somebody who's just moving into leadership, what should they know?
So there's a couple things. The first thing that I think was one of the most important was to surround yourself with the right people. Whether it's a mentor that you have that has been in your shoes before, that can help you understand how to navigate how to navigate different situations. That's really important. But also, the people that support you on your team in your leadership role. I think about this assistant director that I had when I was a director of front office operations at a hotel, and he had been there for 15 years before I started. And we were the first thing we did was talk about, what are the things that you like to do in this job? What are the things that you think that you're good at? And those are the things that I had him working on as much as possible. And then over time, we kind of learned, what things each of us worked better at. And those are the duties that we did because it just worked better that way. He had strengths that were weaknesses of mine. I'm a little ADD at times and can go off on different squirrel trails, and he was not that way, and he helped keep things organized, and that's something that I've tried to do. I know my weaknesses and my strengths, and I try to surround myself with people that have different strengths than me, and weaknesses that I can help fill those gaps.
You talked a little bit about your interest in Studer Group because you knew that they were like an all-star cast. You're excited to be there because I think there's a really important theory, especially in like the music world where I spent some time. You get better when you're around people that are better at things than you are, right? Like if you're around people that are kind of on your skill level, you kind of stagnate a little bit. So what are some of the best and most impactful things that you took away from that all-star cast? Like, man, I would have never known that had I not worked here.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up. It's that old biblical adage of iron sharpens iron, right? Where you put yourself around people that are strong. I think one thing that really helped me, I was always very nervous at public speaking. I remember taking public speaking classes in college, and I would just stand really still and get very monotone and very deep and quiet because that's the only way I could get through it. But I actually went through a speaker training there that they put a lot of the employees through with a guy named Terrell Bechtel. He's also known as T. Bubba Bechtel in the comedy world, and he actually just passed away a few months ago, unfortunately. But he trained so many people that went on to be national speakers, and that was their primary duty and their job. That were trained by this guy, and I think being with him and some other great speakers that worked in the organization, I would try to learn about, the way that they did it and make that my own and learn some techniques about the nerves and how to get over those nerves. I still get nervous anytime I go up in front of people.
What would he say about public speaking? Like what are the things that he taught you about that?
So one of the big things was just being confident. It shows when you're not confident. I right before I got onto this podcast, I was thinking, all right, I need to think about the way that I'm speaking and the way that I'm acting because I was nervous before I got on with you guys to tell you the truth.
And then you saw us and you thought, oh, if these guys are the hosts.
Oh yeah, I've known Franklin since I was 5. Yeah. I think that's a big piece of it. Getting to know your audience. One thing, we worked with a lot of people in healthcare, of course, and there was this one physician that I worked with, and he was at this event. He was getting ready to speak, and I was sitting behind him in the audience. And I see him on the website of this organization, going through their leadership team, looking at the different people's names, and trying to find them in the audience. He's reading their mission, their vision, and their values, and he uses all that in his speech or in his presentation that he's doing. And that's something that I took a lot away from. I was like, I need to know my audience as much as possible because I am sometimes known to tell bad dad jokes whenever I'm presenting. And if I get a feeling that these people aren't up for these jokes, I need to just cut them out and be a little more serious. So that's something that I think was really important when you're doing that type of a presentation.
So I've got another concept that we could go through. So this I think applies globally to both, just organizational leadership, but also in your political position. How do you manage expectations from people who want very different things and walk away so that everybody's kind of okay with the decision that's made? It's kind of a negotiation process, right?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful not to come off as patronizing for one thing. I caught myself in a disagreement with someone and saying, I understand that, but this is what I think, and that's what I'm going to do. Where, putting yourself actually in somebody's shoes. One thing that we coached a lot at Studer Group was compassion. And, compassion is the action that you have when you're empathizing with somebody. So you empathize, you put yourself in somebody's shoes, and having compassion is that action that you're showing towards them. And I think that's something that you have to do whenever you're in a conversation, in a negotiation, in a disagreement with somebody, is understand where they're coming from And uh, that's the thing with politics today is oftentimes, everybody's either far right or far left. And that's what I love about city of Pensacola politics, at least, is it's nonpartisan. So you can work with other people. That's where I see, when people have these huge disagreements, they're not trying to understand where the other person's coming from. And that's the first thing I do is try to say, why does this person feel this way? Explain to them why I may feel differently, help them get in my shoes as well, and then work through it like that.
That's so interesting. So let's lean into that for a second. So compassion as a concept that you were pushing really hard at Studer Group, how does that become an asset when you're trying to build a business? Like teaching and instilling compassion into your employees, how does that help the organization move forward?
I think you could do it with any type of organization. We worked with a lot of healthcare organizations, so I think it's obvious why you need compassion there, because people are in kind of dire straits a lot of times. You have family members that are losing their father or mother or child, and oftentimes we hear of these healthcare providers that are just so callous because they see it every day, and it's just another day to them. But they need to empathize, put themselves in that person's shoes, to try to understand how to have compassion for them and what they're going through. I think you can do that in any business, especially when you're dealing with customers, whether you're a business to business type sales or you're selling directly to consumers. You're going to have people that are not happy with something. Working at hotels, especially resort hotels, it was somebody's checking in. They come in, they're already mad at you for some reason, and you can't figure out why. And one thing that I would try to instill in my employees is, hey, this person's been in their car for 8 hours with those 3 kids right there that are still fighting. Think about how you would feel after 8 hours with those 3 kids. So understanding where they're coming from, why they're upset, is something that I think you can do with any kind of business. And even when you're going into sales, I think you need to understand who you're selling to, what they're going through. Working in healthcare consulting in the time of COVID, you're dealing, like I said earlier, you're dealing with someone that just had to shut down all their surgical services or just shut down all of their clinics. And they're trying to figure out how they're even going to stay open because they're not bringing any money in. So trying to understand that whenever you're saying, hey, I want you to give me some money so I can come in and help you with that, is something that I think is important to do as well.
And when you're shifting over to, I know that you've also served on some like transportation planning boards and city council boards and things like that. Is it harder to muster that same empathy and compassion when at the end of the day you're talking about asphalt and painting lanes onto a road, or how's that work out?
One of they call it the TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, is one of the boards that I serve on now. It's made up of 20 something people that are in different offices in the region. There's one, I'm going to keep talking about roads, but that is a hot topic. And I think it is something that you have to think about who is affecting. So one of our neighboring cities, Milton, Florida, they've got this little 2-lane road that runs right through their downtown, and they're trying to revitalize their downtown. Well, the Department of Transportation wants to widen that road to 4 lanes, so they can get traffic moving through there a lot faster. Well, a lot of the people in Milton, their entire city council, in fact, does not want that to happen because they want people to be able to walk down the street. They want people to be able to cross the road and go to the different restaurants or shops that are there. So that's where, again, it's back to the people. It's not just the asphalt, but how does that asphalt affect people? And getting to understand that helps me make decisions. And there have been decisions, there's been things that I voted for that after the fact, I was like, man, now that I see it a little differently, I wish I would have voted differently. Hopefully I have a chance to correct that down the road.
So you talked about compassion. What other character traits do you think are important for someone to be successful in business and in life and careers, politics, whatever? What other kind of character traits did you really need to kind of hone in to be where you are? I
would say I'm going to use the word perseverance. or even grit. There's a whole book about grit, right? And I think you have to balance that with other things that are going on in your life as well. There, when times get hard, are you going to put your head down and keep going, or are you just going to give up? And I'll admit there have been times in my life where I'd said, okay, this is hard. It's not worth the effort to push through this. But if you're starting a business, especially, or trying to make a business successful, I think perseverance is the only thing that the only way to go is to keep pushing until you achieve what you're looking to achieve.
Can you work that muscle? Can you build that muscle up over time? Is that it? Because it's not a natural thing, right? It's not natural. It's not natural feeling for any human being to push past friction or to push past failure and block out negative, chatter. You have to kind of like put yourself in a mindset and give yourself some like mental mantras and things and go. Have you found that that's a muscle that you can make stronger is to kind of block out the haters and persevere?
I think with anything, it takes practice. You just gotta do it. And, if it's at the little things, one thing that I got really into a while back, was CrossFit. I was way out of shape. Surprisingly, I just finished up the Appalachian Trail. It was about 6 months later where I just didn't do anything, for that 6 months because I was over walking. And I decided to start doing CrossFit and man, any kind of intense exercise like that, whether it's a boot camp or something else that's similar, there are times where you just want to quit, or there are times when you have to do 20 reps and you're going to count by twos and try to finish earlier. But I think, doing that really helped me even to gain that or strengthen that muscle of perseverance where, even though, something was really difficult, I'm competitive and I want to win things, and I'm going to keep pushing, and hopefully win, or at least, not be last. That's usually was my goal, was not to be last.
Well, in CrossFit, I guess we could sort of let that look. I love CrossFit. CrossFit sent me into back surgery, so I got to do lower octane stuff. So the kind of one of the last things I wanted to dive into was, when you're at where you're at in your career, you have to have gotten very good at putting yourself out there, and that takes I know we talked about sort of like the courage to sort of block out, but what about the courage to get started? Or what about the fear that people have to put yourself out there? And I know you did a lot of that in your career. The idea that you're going to put yourself out there and run for any kind of political office is a nerve-wracking thing. So if you were talking to somebody, giving somebody advice that was getting ready to take a big leap, and they were afraid and they didn't think they could do it, or they were afraid of the criticism that they were going to get, what advice would you give somebody to help them take that big leap?
This really hits home with me because I think that putting myself out there often goes against my nature and even my faith. As a Christian, I try to be humble. That's something that I feel like I'm led to do. But that isn't always the way to move forward in business or politics. It was actually working at Studer Group. I had started a new role about a year in, and it was me and one other person that had this role. And she had been in this role for a long time, and she was really good at putting herself out there, and I was not. So I knew that I probably wasn't doing what I needed to do. And I had a boss that really pushed me. He said, "You're going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to start reaching out to people and offering to work with them. You're going to have to, volunteer to do different things that you wouldn't do otherwise." Speaking at these national conferences that we had, that was something that was terrifying to me at first. Getting up in front of 1,000 or 2,000 people and speaking about a topic that, to these healthcare leaders, some of them that have been doing healthcare for 30 years, and trying to help them learn something. That was scary at first. But my advice would be just to do it. You have to just kind of put some of your natural instincts of just hiding out or coasting aside, if that's something that's natural to you, and just put yourself out there, and eventually you're going to get comfortable with it. We were at the soccer fields a couple weeks ago. My 5-year-old just recently started playing soccer. And as we're walking out, somebody was like, "Hey, I've been seeing you on the news a lot lately." And I'm still like, "Oh." I don't know if that's a good thing. It was for good stuff, but it's still not comfortable for me to put myself out there. But I know that that's the only way that I'm going to be successful. That's the only way that on city council wise, that's the only way I'm going to get stuff passed, is if I put myself out there, explain my reasoning for things, and try to get other people on board to support something.
I just agree 100%. Like you're a great example of just the idea. Frank and I talk about it a lot, like this concept of sort of progress over perfection. I think a lot of people don't begin public speaking because they don't feel like they're very good at it, and they don't ever become very good at it because they don't ever do it. I think, you get on TV, we're doing this podcast. Like, I hope that we're a lot better in episode 50 than we are in episode 2. Right. And we're working on it, folks. Like, we're going to, I just feel like, the average person fails to get where they want to go because they just don't take the first step. Like, that first step is the hardest one to take. And then you're kind of already moving. And then you realize that, like, the criticism that you get, it just isn't all that bad. And you realize that most of the time the criticism that you're getting is coming from people that aren't even in the arena and would never have the courage to get in the, or aren't actually trying to solve a problem. They're just throwing some kind of angst at a person or an idea. They're not even really talking about you personally. I've had to sort of wrap my head around that. As Procter U became kind of a very widely used product, we got all sorts of crazy stuff. People saying things about my mother all the time on Twitter. Like, come on, man. My mom's a saint, right? But they don't know me personally or my mother. And so for me, I had to get to a place where once I understood that people were attacking an abstract idea, then it made it a lot easier for me to keep moving, because it really wasn't about me. It was about their thoughts about something that I was connected to. Very, very different than them talking about me sort of directly. And I just think if more people would realize that the people that get somewhere in life are the ones that just take action, even if that action isn't super pretty or super polished, and they just keep doing it. The people that are really, really good at things it's because they've done it a lot and they've gotten really good at it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Casey, one of the last things that I wanted to circle back to is you talked a little bit about being a competitive person, right? And business is obviously a competitive space, and even politics can be incredibly competitive. How do you separate the natural competitiveness and be able to fold that into working together to achieve the same goal? Sometimes when you're in a business, it can get a little bit toxic because you're all working for the same company and you're supposed to be trying to achieve the same goal, but you can't help but notice that the director or the manager or the city councilman next to you is just like subverting what you're trying to do. Like, so can you talk a little bit about that challenge and kind of how you've worked through that? Because I know that's going to happen on the city council, especially.
Oh yeah, I think city council is a perfect example of this, because you've got 7 people, and you have to have at least 4 of them vote for something for it to pass. So, you may have that one person that is going against it, or 2 people that's going against something that you're trying to do. Well, let me bring those other 4 people back to vote for this. But I would say I'm going to keep harping on this, the personal side of things. If I can bring in someone to a conversation, a one-on-one conversation, and I can't do that with city council because of Florida sunshine laws, but we're a 7-person group that has to talk in a public meeting. But making those personal connections outside the meeting, talking about the grandkids or the cats or the day job, it's that concept of helping to build that personal bank account. And I'm putting deposits into that bank account that later on, I might need to make a withdrawal. And if I've made enough of those deposits and those positive moments with that person, then hopefully they'll be okay with me making that withdrawal and asking something of them.
That's interesting. That's always been tough for me in an environment like that, because I tend to be more private. So it's not natural to reach out and ask about somebody's cats because I don't necessarily care. But I definitely see the importance of it, right? The bank account metaphor makes a lot of sense. So
people don't want to help you unless they think you genuinely care, and so you have to make yourself care. I mean, it's if you're a curmudgeonly old soul like Franklin, like it's hard to make yourself. I'm kidding. Anyway, so Casey, it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for sharing some of your story with us and the wisdom that you've gotten at the ripe old age of, I think, 40. Is that where you are? Or we not?
I am 40 and a half.
40 and a half. So we appreciate all the wisdom. Thank you so much, by the way, for taking care of my hometown. I love it down there, and want to see the best, and it takes people getting engaged and doing stuff to make things happen. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great talking to you.